Talk, talk, talk.
No, you know what? I'm good. I got my water right here. Do you need a little break?
I'm good. So everyone,
Okay.
I have no idea what happened. So thank you. I'm sorry that we had this huge technical hiccup. We had a wonderful preamble that you can listen to in the recording. My goodness. But if you're here now, we are about to dive in with, you get a second introduction. I'll keep this one very brief.
Okay.
Kristin Mathis, Cosmic Spirit Auntie, Mysteria Mundi. Go back, listen to the recording. And I just thought it was a bad signal. Okay. And here we go. We're talking about the 7 traditional planets, and all of you take it over from here.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I mean, I guess I'll just say that I'll start with saying that one of the important things I think that the Orphic Hymns offer us is that they offer us a way to see the cosmology or the cosmic map of the universe that lies behind traditional astrology, behind Hermeticism, behind essentially the entire Western esoteric tradition. And and by Western, I mean including the Mesopotamia and Egypt and the Islamic astrological, alchemical tradition. It all, everything that can be traced back in some way, shape, or form to ancient Greece has the Orphic mysteries running through them. Okay, so, and I want to give an important caveat here that the Orphic mysteries probably began as a conversation between Greeks in southern Italy and folks from both Egypt and Phoenicia, which is what we now call Israel, Palestine, and that area. So these very ancient cultures of Egypt and Mesopotamia and the Levant were trading and in conversation with Greek colonies in southern Italy. And what arose from there is came to be called the Orphic mysteries. And the hymns are one of the surviving bodies of work associated with that mystery tradition. And so when we're looking at these hymns, we're sort of looking back through the whole Western esoteric tradition back to its very origins. And as we go through these 7 traditional planets, there's going to be a lot that will sound familiar because Hellenistic astrology grows out of this cultural context. And there will also be parts of it that are much richer and more surprising and more soulful, let's say, than sometimes what we think of as astrology has come to be, right? Like when we first encounter astrology, we encounter it as sort of like a list of things that go together, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, you know, I'm a Libra, so that means ba-da, 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 and I'm a this, and that means ba-da, ba-da, ba-da. And then you eventually learn, okay, well, Libra means this because of Venus, and then there's a whole other set of things to memorize about Venus, you know? And those are all good ways to learn how to be. Yeah, I mean, there at some point you have to remember things.
Yeah.
But really, there's behind it, there is a whole way of understanding the universe as a living, breathing, sentient being
Yeah.
that also has inside it more living, breathing, sentient beings. And we're all relating to each other inside this cosmic body. And that vision of how everything works is what lies behind the astrological charts that you read. I mean, we can literally map the cosmos onto an astrological chart in many, many, with many, many different layers. We can look at that astrological chart as a chart of somebody's life.
Yeah.
But we can also look at that chart as a chart of the cosmos with the sort of what we'd call heaven, what we'd call the underworld, and then the points of transition in between. We can look at it as a chart of the year with the equinox points and the winter and summer solstice. We can look at it as a chart that contains information about medicine. I mean, there's so many different levels that we can look at that chart. And the 7 planets are, I like to think of them as characters who inhabit this universe, and we can get to know them in the same way that we get to know a room full of people. They have their individual quirks. Some of them are like that favorite auntie or uncle who you always look forward to seeing. Some of them are that, you know, the ne'er-do-well cousin over lurking in the corner offering you a cigarette. And some of them are, you know, these profound and somewhat scary figures, you know, but they're our family. They're our cosmic family. And they're always there for us. Yeah, you know, even when we grow up in families that have, you know, maybe we have a troubled past or a troubled connection to our human biological family, the cosmic family are always there.
I'm going to dive in here for a moment to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I mean, plants themselves. This idea that they're always there for us. Was there, remember a moment in your life where you had that realization on a sort of real level? We were like, the planets have my back.
Oh my God, like every day. But like you mean like the first, I think for me, I think it was like a gradual dawning of it. I mean, I've definitely had like those big, you know, like the dream or, you know, big moments where I feel like I'm being spoken to. But I think actually one of the benefits of getting older is things get quieter. Or maybe it's just that I'm not as rattled or jumpy about things as I used to be. Like
Yeah.
I'm thinking nowadays I get those types of dreams all the time, but they've just become normal, like I write them down. Sometimes I tweet about them, sometimes I don't. And they're just a regular part of my life. And yeah, I find it's they're ordinary, right? Like it doesn't our cosmic family,
Yeah.
it's an ordinary family. It's, we and it's just as beautiful and mundane as um as our lives, because it is our lives. It's not like something over there,
Sure, sure.
right? Um but yeah, I'm trying to think if I can think of a particular moment. I think there was a point in my life, I have this very special relationship with actually an Egyptian deity, Sekhmet, who is the solar deity. She's the rays of the sun. And I had a very dramatic awakening to Sekhmet. Happened in the Met Museum with one of her statues. I didn't even know who she was. I had no idea she existed. And I heard a voice and it called me and it said, "You have been my beloved of old." And I was like, what the heck is going on? It was really intense. And for a while I was young. This is like nearly 30 years ago. And I was like, really, oh my God, people are speaking to me, Sekhmet is talking to me. And I did all this research and found out about her. And nowadays, my relationship with her is pretty quiet. We just hang out. And yeah, I mean, I talk to her all the time. I mean, it's just like I might just be chopping vegetables for dinner and I'm talking to Sekhmet in my head. And I know that that's where I'm going to go when I die. I have zero doubt that I'm going to be with Sekhmet. And I don't know how I know that. I just know that over the 30 some years, or 29 years or whatever it is that I've been talking with her, that there's been a quiet assurance growing. And I wouldn't say that is like my personal experience of that is so intimate. And I'm sure other people have experiences like that with deities who are not Sekhmet, who are different deities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for you, it's wow, it's an actual experience of, so you mentioned dreams. So is a lot of it this conversation happening in dreams, but also just like vegetables? I love that you just have this very sort of fluid relationship.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, there are dreams and things, but mostly it's like I'll get up and I'm a normal person. I get up and I forget. I forget to like open the, I have a little shrine thing, and I forget to open it up, and all of a sudden I just am like, oh God, I'm sorry, Mother. Yeah, sorry, you missed your sunbeam today. She likes it when the sunbeam hits her, and like I missed it today. I'm so sorry. And then I'll be like, hey, you want some orange juice? So orange juice for you. I mean, it's just like, it's a very I don't know, just normal, just every day. It's like not a big deal.
I love that. Um, man, okay. I'm so bummed that no one heard the first half of this, but it's recorded. So if you have to leave,
it's recorded, and I think we should dive into the planets because they're so cool. Like, I'm so excited about the Orphic Hymns and the planets.
Do we have to? I mean, it feels like I'm gonna in my head guess where you want to start, and I'll see if I'm right.
I'm gonna start with the moon.
Okay, I guess
that
wrong.
where. Oh, what did you think I was gonna start with?
Well, you told this lovely story about how when you had this dream that you ran to Mercury. So I was like,
oh right, yeah, I could start with Mercury. I was gonna be boring and go through like Moon, Mercury, Venus. No, let's start with Mercury. He's fun.
Because this is the first one you did, so I was just
yeah, that's great. See, this is why I need an interlocutor. So yeah, Mercury. I'm not going to read the whole thing because I haven't published it yet, but it begins. The hymn to Hermes begins with I've translated it as "Listen up, Hermes," and that's the tone in the Greek. It's like "Kluthime." It's like listen to me, like yo, over here, eyes on me. You know, most of the hymns begin. Some of them begin "listen," but they don't. It's not like "listen to me," like yo, over here, and and he's called the great contender, right? Like there's a lot of wrestling imagery in Hermes hymn, and his heart is bent on winning, you know, he's in it for the win.
Yeah.
And he is and the wrestling imagery continues because he is described as being philandros, which is a word that means lover of men.
Yeah.
And it's a word that definitely has sexual innuendo. I mean, it's a sexual word essentially, right? If you in ancient Greek, if you called a woman a philandros, it was basically like saying, you know, she's a hoe, right? She likes men too much, you know, she likes men in that sort of way, you know what I mean? Like nudge, nudge. And when you use it about a man, it means the same thing. So, and we have all sorts of examples of this from comedy and Plato's Symposium. The word philandros means a dude who likes guys, who likes to have sex with guys, and or specifically boys, since it's ancient Greece, young men. And the hymn to Hermes goes on and, you know, says, well, you love gymnastics. Well, in ancient Greece, they practiced gymnastics in the nude, and it was a trope. It was like a common stereotype in Greek comedy that there are these, you know, men hanging out by the high school, you know, what is high school age gymnasium, to look at the boys wrestling and playing sports in the nude. And, you know, there were laws enacted in Athens that you couldn't go into the gymnasium if you were above a certain age and so basically this hymn is like, hey, Hermes, you're gay as fuck, you know. And we know that you're down there ogling those boys working out in the gym, you know. Come here, listen to me. That's the tone of the hymn as it starts out.
Yeah.
And and then, you know, and they even say things like, you know, you with the feathered sandals, you know, you love men, you hang out at gymnasiums, come listen to me. And I just, you know, I love that for Hermes and and for my relationship with Hermes. It makes him so approachable, and it makes, for me, all his shenanigans like just, yeah, I mean, he's just hysterical. So that's how the hymn starts, and then it goes through, and it gets more serious. It talks about him as someone who's good with words, who is prone to lying. At one point calls him a snake handler, which of course makes sense because he has like the staff with the snake.
Yeah.
And then, he has this role as, because he's facile, or he's good with speech, he's on people's lips as they're dying, and he's the one you call for when you're dying, and because he's going to help you make that transition in between realms, because he's the messenger between realms. He goes between the overworld, the earth, and the underworld. And he facilitates words traveling up and words traveling down, and he facilitates humans traveling up and down. And he's in that same facility with language, gives him, I want to say, like dominion or rulership, or a special interest in commerce, where you have to bargain and haggle a lot. Gives him special interest in court cases, where if you think of him as, you'd want Hermes as your attorney. He can talk his way in and out of anything. And so then from there, he also is described as having a particular affinity with people who are in bondage. So people who are enslaved or in servitude of some sort, because their best weapon is wit and a sharp tongue, or the ability to manipulate through language. So he becomes associated with slaves and people who are in hard situations of one sort or another, because he can help you get out. You want to call on Hermes when you don't have the physical brute force. Just like wrestling, is partly about force, but for the Greeks, right, it's like partly about force, but it's just as much about strategy. So he's that guy, and through through relating to Hermes in his like many facets, right? It's like we can play. I mean, I was about to say we can play with him. He's so playful, and we like in popular, what I'm gonna rightly or wrongly call TikTok astrology. We just, Hermes, Mercury's in retrograde, and it just it can feel like it's really not attached to a personality. But when you think of, I think of Hermes as being like, he's sort of like your gay best friend, or your favorite mischievous cousin. They're like gonna tell you how it is.
Yeah.
You might like it, you might not like it, they're going to run circles around you if you try to outwit them. You know, they're sneaky, like, you know, like a sort of, I'm just thinking like, you know, the bad, the bad cousin in the family who's, you know, handing out the cigarettes behind the house or whatever. I mean, that's him. You know, he's a little shady, and you love him. And so I can't even get angry with him anymore. Like when stuff happens, when he's in retrograde, you know, I once like made it my practice during a Mercury retrograde to like, I asked him what he needed. And he was like, well, I sort of like this running backwards stuff, you know, like I sort of like, it's sort of fun, you know, but I do get tired every once in a while. And yeah, that was like, that's sort of the flavor that I've found through these hymns, you know. It's very personal. I don't know. Does that resonate?
It does. I always think of I always have this certain I like Mercury retrogrades personally because I think of them as like we get the rest, Mercury's off doing whatever, but I love this visual you've introduced of Mercury running backwards. I love this like idea that we can call on Mercury, right? Mercury is not just like hanging out causing mischief, but there's this idea that like also the person that you know is going to be there when you need them.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It's like if you're in a bind, I mean, again, I keep going with this, you know, mischievous cousin.
Yeah.
You know, but like if you're stuck at your friend's house and you're, you know, I don't know, if you're in a tough bind, whether it's you've drank too much and you can't get home and you don't want to call your parents, or you know, you're some, you know, or you're, you know, in serious trouble and you don't know who to turn to. Often it's that like slightly shady but lovable family character who you might actually think to call on at that time. And certainly if you needed somebody to help you defend yourself in court, you're not going to call, you know, Venus, who's going to show up, and you know, you might ask her what to wear, but
or maybe
you
not
know, for the court date, you know. But yeah, maybe not even. But like, you know, she's not going to be much use in a courtroom. Hermes has your back, you know.
Now, I love that you've given us this full breadth of this character, our character, Hermes. I have to ask, why did you come across this when you were doing the translation? Like, why does Hermes like Virgo so much and Pisces so little?
Yeah. So Hermes, now we're getting, this is deep, right? This is deep Orphic stuff, and I'm not going to be able to do it justice here. But to make a long story short, Virgo is Kore is the young girl.
Okay.
And is connected in Orphic cosmology in the grand scheme of things. It's Virgo's connected to Hecate, to Persephone, to the moon, and the moon is responsible for ferrying human souls into and out of the physical body. Okay. So Hermes, as mediating between the realms, has an affinity for working. I mean, Hermes works hand in hand with the moon. Hermes is the guide, as it were, the companion on the interworld journey. And the moon is like is literally called the nanny, or the child rearer, who helps the soul come into its body and also be released from its body
Okay.
in the moment of birth and death. And so Hermes works with Kure to do that. And on the contrary, with Pisces, who, you know, just back to my naughty cousin, you know, when grandpa comes in the house, you know, when Jupiter enters the chat, Mercury gets put in his place. You know, he has to behave and be on good behavior, and he doesn't, you know, he's not, he can't get away with all his shenanigans. And on a deep mystery level, you know, I'm still, to be honest, I'm still working on this, which is one reason why I haven't released the Hermes translation yet. But I think that there is, Jupiter is a liberator, but in the way, in the sense that Jupiter is a king. Right? So, like, think about a king going into, let's just say a king who liberates the people in his rule, or you know, there's an oppressor who's governing a region, and a local chieftain or king rises up and pushes those people out.
Okay.
Hermes is a liberator of the underclass, right? So he's like, if we were going to put them into a medieval court context, Jupiter is the king and Mercury is the jester, probably, right? Like the somebody who's a messenger, but also can poke fun of the king a little bit, but ultimately is very much under the king's thumb. That's the best I can give right now.
That's fantastic. I've never thought about it from that perspective, right? Like the whole Jupiter Mercury, right, connection in that specific way. That's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I wish I could claim it was mine, but it comes from the hymns.
I'm going to see if anyone has questions. I'm going to pop in here. I think we're getting this. Okay. Let's see. Can you see the comments if you may exit the full screen, Kristin?
Chat with everyone in the studio. No. Comments? Okay. Oh, yeah.
Let's see if we have anything you want to respond to before we move on.
Oh, Tom, I'm a normal person. Kristin Mathis, that's hilarious. Tom knows I'm a normal person. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah, Mercury is common as of the people. Yeah, I mean, all of this, that's what, when I say that,
can we, for posterity, for the beginning, can you read Drew's comment, Drew Levante?
Oh, sorry. So yes, that was not, Drew said, in the Hellenistic tradition as transmitted by Schmidt, we get that Mercury is common as in of the people. This way of addressing Hermes makes sense with that. And Tristan says, that's a great point, Drew. It very much fits my personal experience of him as a god who doesn't want me to worry too much about formalities. He doesn't want a statue left on the altar. He wants to be brought around the house. That makes total sense. Like nosy. Great article on these ideas through the rabbit archetype. So thanks for putting that in, Drew. Yeah, I think that the idea that Hermes is of the common people comes from the Orphic tradition. So we find that in delineations, right? Like if you read Bedias Valens or Dorotheus or, you know, these different ancient astrologers, you're going to see a list of things that correlate
Okay.
with Hermes, among which are common people, slaves, you know, merchant. But if we have that in astrology because originally we have this figure that's from you know, from Greek myth in general, but specifically in the Orphic hymns, he's developed in a particular way. And the Orphics were particularly interested in how we as humans move through the cosmos and what's our place in the whole cosmic scheme of things. And Hermes is that mediator.
Yeah.
And the quality of a mediator is somebody who can mix with the regular folk and with the high folk, with the low folk, and move up and down. So that's Mercury. I mean, insofar, I mean, I could go on at length, but then we'd never talk about anybody else.
This is such, I mean, we're already, I love this. We're at 37 minutes. We've talked about Mercury. We have this whole lovely intro no one's seen. And could literally do this all night with you because there's so many questions. But we're just like, I want to give this sort of moment to say that we're giving these vignettes of your learning, your learnings, of your findings. We will move through them. But if people are interested in this conversation, they're like, I want so much more. We'll share all the ways to sign up for your Substack at the end, and the project you're doing with Drew. So more on that after. But we will do these.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So,
And you know, if you go to my Substack, you can find things. You know, some of these are released, some of these translations are released already, and some of them are forthcoming. You know what? I'm going to say that I think where I'd like to go next, since we've broken out of the correct order of planets.
I love
it. I want to go to the moon because we just picked that up.
Yeah.
So the moon, there's so much on the moon, and I have a bunch on the moon in my Substack. So I'm just going to touch on a few things here. One is that the moon, so one of the little visuals that I like to give people is that in the latitudes of the Mediterranean, where Orphism began, the moon rises in the shape of the horns of a bull much more frequently than it does here. For us, we occasionally get a moon that rises like this with the two horns pointing up and the base at the bottom. But usually our crescent moon looks more like this, right?
Yeah.
Or like this. But there it tends to rise looking like this. And so this imagery of a bull with the moon is a very natural one. It's one that anybody living in that area of the world from time immemorial could have made and did make. And it was, you know, used the bull imagery and horns. We find it in Egypt. We find it in ancient Mesopotamia. So the moon is this bull-horned figure.
Yeah.
When she is in her crescent phase. And notice the gender morph thing I just did there, right? She is a bull. And so for the Orphics, the moon is both she's spoken about with the feminine gender in Greek, and she is neither masculine nor feminine. So, and the Greeks are fine with that. They don't need to be as exact as we are. Or some of us want to be. I could go on a whole rant here about gender. But I think it's beautiful to watch in the hymns how fluid gender identity is, and and the way that it entered. Sorry, slow down. The hymns have a both and mentality.
Okay.
The moon is both feminine and genderless. They don't see anything problematic about that, and I love it. So we have this feminine moon with horns like a bull. In that imagery of the crescent moon,
Yeah.
it's like a cradle, and the Orphics imagined that this moon cradle bull was the force and person being responsible for embodiment.
Okay.
And embodiment not just of humans, but of plants, animals, anything that exists on Earth, comes through the cosmos,
Okay.
and takes on its particular earthly body here. And that, now I'm going to get really abstract now. The Orphics did not believe that there's a separate soul that is immaterial and a body. They believed that the soul also had a body. It was just a different type of body, right? So our soul is like a sort of cosmic body, let's say, or ethereal body, and it comes and is clothed by the moon with this type of body. And when we die, part of our body leaves and the other part of our body goes up, out through the moon, carries the immortal part of our body up to the Milky Way, where it ascends through the Milky Way up to the stars, which is where our immortal souls belong. So our immortal soul bodies belong with the stars.
And they get
carried
by the moon.
And they get carried on the first part of that journey by the moon. And that's why the moon is called the Kurotrophos, the child nurturer, in the Orphic hymns, because the child, the Kuros is esoteric reference, a hidden reference to the soul, to the human soul. And trophos means nurturer. So and a kurotrophos literally means like a nanny or a child rearer, somebody whose job it is to take care of children. So the moon is our nanny. And the moon, with Hermes trotting along at the side, carries us to the next stage of the journey, which is to ascend up to the stars, who are our original family.
Wow. So if I'm getting this right, we think of, we think of the moon as like describing how one, like nurturing, maybe on this, I think it's sort of common astrology terms, right? Like we think of it as nurturing, but it tends to be like in this sort of human form. But there's this bigger idea that the moon is ultimately what brings us home to where
the moon is our, the moon.
But the moon
Yeah,
actually.
the moon is literally, the word kurotrophos can also be used to describe the person who picks you up from the from the school and takes you home. Kurotrophos is a nanny, in like the person who runs around after the toddler trying to feed them.
Yeah.
That's the moon.
So
isn't that gorgeous?
It's amazing. So we're trying to like get these characters. We have like Mercury is that rambunctious cousin, and like the moon is the ultimate caretaker.
Yeah, totally. And just like with just the moon is also a type of mediator, which is why she goes hand in hand with Mercury, but her type of mediation is the type of mediation that feeds bodies, right? That makes sure your physical well-being is taken care of. And the other face of the moon, by just as she brings us into the world, she also escorts us out, and that is that role is connected to both Persephone and Hecate. And I'm not going to say more about that right now, a lot more about that right now, because I'm still working on that. I'm about to release the hymn to Persephone for the equinox. But there's just a lot there. And there's also, the moon also has a role in keeping time in the seasons. The moon has a role in connecting the human stages of life to the stages of life here on Earth. So Persephone is we're used to thinking of Persephone as like, oh, springtime or maybe autumn, but Persephone is the moon at the equinoxes.
Okay.
For the Orphics. It's the moon. And if I just had this realization the other day, we still have festivals that celebrate the full moon after the equinox. They're called Passover and Easter in the spring, and a harvest moon, like the Mooncake Festival for the fall. Those are calculated by looking at when was the equinox and what's the first full moon after that. Those are sacred to Persephone, those times.
I feel that is a whole conversation that we need to have, just a devoted, like we need to just like put a tack in that and
yes.
Right, like conversation, weary of going down these streams. But again, I'm just going to sort of pinpoint that for those listening, before we move on, if it's okay to move on.
Yeah, of course.
You and Drew Levanti are doing a whole 3-month program. So if you're tasted this and you're excited, stay tuned. There's a link in these notes if you're listening to this recording after this live version. We will put show notes in, and we'll talk at the end about all of the ways to follow.
Yeah.
Where should we go next?
Where should we go next? Let's talk about the sun. Because the sun is, so Helios in Greek. The sun is one of my favorite hymns because it very clearly there's a sound to the hymn. The sound in Greek is like there's it sounds like horse hooves. beat of horse hooves in a chariot race.
Yeah.
And he's called, like Sky Runner, and the images are very much about chariot races and the sun being so quick moving through the sky.
Yeah.
And in sort of more esoteric understandings in Orphism, the sun he's the time, and I say he because, again, it's gender. I'm using the genders that the ancient Greek uses.
Okay.
So he has his lyre, and through his lyre, he grooves the cosmos, is what it says in one place. His lyre sort of like creates the vibrations that actually his lyre creates the vibrations that resonate in sort of space-time to produce the seasons. Right? So like he's, I know, every single one of these is like.
So yeah. the Helios, the sun's music, right, from his lyre creates the vibrations, right, that are the vibrations that create the seasons. Am I getting this correct?
That, yeah, they sort of, they create the seasons because they actually just create like the channels or the grooves or the demarcations between different stages of time, right? Which,
like
sorry?
Like a record.
Yeah, like a record.
Records,
like a record.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like that. Or, if you think in ancient terms, it's the chariot that goes around the race course, and you can see these grooves there, and then you have to sort of like hop over them. And the image is of the sun racing through the sky on his chariot every day, but also being the time, how long it takes him each day is different. And through that, we get the seasons of the year.
Okay. Last time we were talking about this, we did an interview on IG Live, talking about this sound the sun makes. And you mentioned I'll let you mention it again. It's brilliant.
Oh, no, just that I was interested in the sound, the fact that there's this sound. At one point, the Helios is compared to a spinning magic disc of the sort that would have been used by ancient practitioners of magic, and also in the mystery rituals themselves, there were these sort of twirling disc toys that you would use and spin, and you get this humming sound, like thum thum thum. And when you go to NASA and Google, what does the sun sound like? You find these tracks where NASA has recorded the electromagnetic sound of the sun, and it is indeed thum 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 thum. It's amazing. And even when I think about like this idea of the sun sort of through its groove, let's call it, it's grooving, it's dance, it's groovy dance, that it carves out space-time. I mean, that's actually just true from like a scientific perspective, right? The sun warps space-time, and that's what causes gravity in the planet. I mean, it's amazing to me. Anyway, If you want to go down like a real rabbit hole, go Google a bunch of NASA things, facts about the sun, and read them alongside the Orphic hymn. It's pretty intense. Yeah, so that's the sun, and because he is this thrumming sort of heartbeat of the
Yeah.
cosmos, the very quick moving, just like our own heart. That's where we get these associations later on with Greek medicine, where the sun is the ruler of the heart, and in astrology, we get this idea of the sun being the heart and shining out, and it really encapsulating something essential about the person in this particular incarnation, right? Like in this body, who am I right now? Not where am I going?
Yeah.
Not where have I been, but who am I right now? What is essential to me in this body? Which is funny to say that, because we often think about the moon as being bodily things, but that's a little different, right? Like that has to do with how you inhabit your physicality.
Yeah.
Whereas the sun, I think, is, again, it's like, how do you dance? What's your dance here on Earth right now? Like, how do you groove? What's your groove, baby?
It's interesting because you think of like a baseline, or like, and I think of sun ruling Leo, and there being like a steadiness to that beat. Like even though maybe a certain consistency, like a heartbeat, right? It's bad if you have an irregular heartbeat, right? That the baseline of the through line through your life, perhaps.
Exactly. The through line, the sort of like a default way that you operate, so that's the sun. Let's back up and talk a little bit about Venus, and then we'll go to Mars. Actually, I'm going to reverse that. I'm going to talk Mars and then Venus. So Mars,
why?
Which what?
Why did you just move Mars up?
Oh, I just moved Mars up because I wanted to set the stage for Venus.
Okay.
So with Mars, the picture in the hymn, and I did release this hymn already, but the picture in the hymn is there's two sections of the hymn. The first section is detailing what an uncontrolled Mars is like. So it's just like, you're a homicidal maniac, you give people the shivers, you're creepy, and you delight in murder and gore. And then in the middle of the hymn, it says, stop. I mean, it literally just says, stop. Instead of everything that went before. Try this, Why don't you, and it gives him options, like a schoolboy, like a naughty schoolboy running with scissors. It's just like, no, don't do that. Wouldn't you rather go play with Venus and have some really wild sex, or go drinking with your buddy Dionysus out there and just, party all night? Or even better, go out and work those fields, burn off that energy farming with Demeter. And it is, if you think about it, those are all three of them very martial activities. Mars is like stamina, drive, force, things that require sustained force, right?
Yeah.
And you cannot, I'll tell you now as an official old person, TM, I cannot drink or party the way I did, like requires youth and stamina and dedication to go clubbing every night, you know? And you can't, I mean, certain types of sex at least are very vigorous and require stamina and energy. If you're going to pull an all-nighter, you need Mars. And same thing with farming. It's very physical, and involves iron and tools in the same way that war does. So, the Orphic image of Mars taking his sword and doing plow work for Demeter. I mean, that's like the original turning into plowshares. And all of that is packaged in this short hymn that reads very much like a magical spell, a magical binding spell, like describes the person who you're trying to bind or limit or, essentially curse. Okay. And then it details to them what they need to do instead. And at the very end of the Mars hymn, we get a reference to the moon, the Kurotrophos. It says, if you do all these other things, if you hang out with Venus, hang out with Dionysus, or hang out with the moon, you will make the hearts of the Kurotrophos happy. And you can read that just in very straightforward Greek as being like, if you stop killing people, mothers' hearts will be happy everywhere, basically, and that's true. Yeah. But there's this other deeper meaning there where the Kurotrophos, the moon, who cares for these human soul bodies, does not have any time for your nonsense, Mars. Just stop it. And do these other productive things, because she's entrusted with this job and she's not going to have your shenanigans. So that's Mars.
I just I think now the vision that came to mind was like, I once had a Jack Russell Terrier, and it would just go give it a bone, or it would just go and eat birds out of the sky. Keep it busy.
Yeah, exactly. It's just go over there, do those things, you be a good boy. Okay, now you've made mommy happy. Very nice.
Can we,
good Mars.
Could we dive a little more into this relationship between Mars and the moon, though? That's what's really
yeah because
before.
I mean, you can map it on an astrological chart, right? The moon has its the moon does not do well in Cancer, let's just say that. And Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon. But
Mars does not do well in Cancer.
Sorry?
You said the moon. Mars does not do well in Cancer.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Mars does not do well in Cancer. That's what I meant. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mars does not do well in Cancer, and Cancer is ruled by the moon. It's the moon has that effect on Mars. And when we understand these relationships between them as characters, you can begin to see why whether it's the joy or the detriment. Yeah. You can see why they're mapped that way on the Thema Mundi in Hellenistic astrology. The same thing you can look at, and I do have some graphics that go with this on my Substack site, but you can actually follow and see, okay, yeah, Mars is, does well here because that's ruled by Jupiter, or, that's ruled by, who's associated with Dionysus, or that's ruled by Venus. So we can really see in a very concrete way how the Hellenistic astrologers were taking, they were all initiates. They're all, it was common to be an initiate. and common to be, particularly for these very well-educated folks who are writing astrological treatises.
Sure.
So they are taking these teachings that they've learned in the mysteries and using them to describe relationships of the celestial bodies in the sky on a written page. The relationships in the sky were already talked about by the Orphics, but mapping them all in this particular way onto an astrological chart arises, as something relatively new in the Greek world during the Hellenistic era.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Can
I, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Not to just like hammer it in, but I'm curious to know, like, it was interesting how you described when you were talking about why Mercury doesn't like to be in Pisces, about that nature, like the relationship between the two. Could you maybe like in like character, like descriptor, maybe talk a little bit about like why Mars has difficulty in the home of the moon, and then the moon, right, doesn't really do well in Scorpio, the home of Mars. Like, can we maybe
yeah,
talk about the character analysis?
So like give it a family drama, right?
Give it a family drama, yes.
Yeah, right. So Mars doesn't do well with the moon because the moon is like, the moon is a really good nanny, right? The moon is not putting up with any bullshit, and but not in a mean way.
Yeah.
Just in the same way that you would, a good nanny or teacher or older sibling or parent would take a child running with scissors and gently guide them and be like, oh, I used to teach. So, I might do something like, oh, it looks like you want to play with scissors. Would you like some paper? And then, before the kid even knows what happens, the scissors are either out of their hand and replaced with something safer, or they're using the scissors, but in an appropriate way, right? And that's what the moon does to Mars, which is why Mars doesn't get aggravated in Cancer. Mars gets calmed in Cancer, right? So when Mars goes into Cancer, it like with benefic planets, right? So when Venus is in detriment, or fall, she's prevented from doing Venusian things. And for us humans, that feels, like not so great.
Yeah.
But when Mars is prevented from doing the Marsiest Mars things, it actually feels a lot better. Because if Mars were doing the Marsiest Mars things, it would be painful. So, if a toddler were running around unfettered with scissors, or a show it off, 11-year-old were swinging a sword around their head, somebody's going to get hurt. And there's a time and a place for that, right? Like there are times when you want Mars with all of his energy. If someone's coming to invade your home, you want to stand up to them that way. Or if my favorite martial figure in my own life was when I've had a chance to, I do a lot of advocacy work around gender-based violence, and the middle-aged women who are at the doors to the shelters, the domestic violence shelters, you cannot get past them. They're just middle-aged women, just. But they are fierce. They're so gentle. They're like, oh, hey, sweetie, how you doing? Have you been treated? How's life treating you? Come on in. But if somebody shows up at that door who's not supposed to be there, they're going to take you down 25 different ways, and call the cops and set the alarm off. They are so full of appropriately channeled full on Mars energy.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Totally. And I feel
And
like
that
leaving
and
it like
that doesn't work well in Cancer, right? Like Cancer with the nanny is disarming Mars. And whether, you know, when Mars is trying to do his Mars thing, she's taking the scissors away and redirecting. Go over there and farm, you know?
Yeah. No, that's a whole, again, that's a whole conversation, but that's perfect. I'm just like sit and think about that. Just like, you know, that relationship makes total sense, right? We could dive into it in 1,000 different ways.
Yeah.
Man.
And same thing for the vice versa, right?
Yeah,
The
I
moon
wonder a
in
little bit about that.
Scorpio, right? Like the you know, the nanny is not going to do well if she's in the house full of where she's not in charge,
Yeah.
and Mars is. Like, you know, I mean, you know, a house of, you know, with a scorpion with a big stinger, and she's trying to carry this little human soul around, you know, that she does not want to be, cannot do her job very effectively, you know, in the house of scorpions.
I'm still seeing sometimes of like the moon in Scorpio is like a sauna. Like she can't get comfortable. She's just like, and then just wants to hop out.
Yeah, that's such a good image. Yeah, especially because like if you think of like a stereotypical nanny, it's like Mary Poppins. She has all these clothes on and like skirts and hats and things, and she's in a sauna where there's scorpions running around on the floor. You know, it's not an ideal environment to care for babies. Yeah. Should I go to Venus? I want to keep.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's go. I mentioned Venus, that Mars does well there because yes, you need stamina. But Venus in the Orphic hymns is the be all and end all. Venus is the beginning, and Venus is union, right? Venus is the force of union, but Venus also is union.
Okay.
Venus is what existed before any separation could not only happened, but before it was even thought of happening. Venus is primordial union. And you could say, and they do in various places, that Venus is the one, you know, capital O. And so Venus is, or Aphrodite rather, heavenly Aphrodite, is both a force within the cosmos and manifests herself in the cosmos. And anytime there's anything that is attracted to each other, both sexually, but also in any way whatsoever. And Venus also exists outside and beyond the cosmos because she is the one. Before anything existed, Venus was. I mean, if you think about like the Big Bang, right? You have this.
Yeah.
That's Venus. Then you have everything. And yet there's still a force that's being exerted, right? Gravity, or, you know, there is this cosmic force that wants to pull everything together. And that's Venus. And so that is what manifests between two people, whether they're friends or family or, you know, interested strangers or lovers, when we make a connection to somebody, that's that force between us is Venus. But it's also the force that attracts ants to picnics. You know, it's you know, or anything to anything. Cosmic bodies to each other. That's Venus, and she's called for that reason. She's called persuasion, right? So she's because to persuade somebody or to persuade is to entice or to draw in, to bring into union. She's also talked about as the mother of anguished need. She is, because Venus, union isn't always comfortable. Union actually can be really uncomfortable if what you want to be united with is not available. You have Venus as, for instance, unrequited love.
Yeah.
You're crushing on somebody, they don't love you. It hurts. It feels terrible. Venus does not always feel good. Venus often feels really bad, actually. And Venus also is unrequited love in the form of grief, right? Grief is a face of Aphrodite. You're here, then you leave. I miss you.
Like love.
I long for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Lust, right? So lust, loss, grief, it can all be painful. And those are all different faces of Aphrodite. And that's one reason why she's so freaking powerful. It's because she manifests in every part of our lives.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm thinking about, right, that sort of what is it? I don't know. The sort of the human condition, right? And sort of the, like, maybe the Indian tradition of like samsara, right? The sort of like sort of delusion from the material world, right? And it's like that constantly wanting something and never sort of being fulfilled. But that now you're putting it in these terms, it feels very like Venus, of like the desire, but the need to bind to something. What happens if you can't, if you're doing that?
Totally.
Or get there.
Totally. Yeah. There's this like, what, you know, there's a link here to magic.
Yeah.
Because binding spells or spells to, you know, create a link of some sort, right? Especially erotic binding spells where you bind someone to you through love or lust, but also whether it's horse races or, you know, some desires, using magic to facilitate a desire that is related to Aphrodite. I mean, it's complex, right? The words of that might be Hermes, and maybe Saturn is the chains around the voodoo figure or something, but like, you know, but Aphrodite is the desire there. And Aphrodite is also the desire behind war, because war is a form of, you know, is the violence of it is Aries. Aries is the soldier. Right?
Yes.
But Aphrodite is the reason why he went to war in the first place. Aphrodite is Helen of Troy.
Now, can we take this? So I was always thinking about this family drama, right? Knowing that Aries and Aphrodite had this sort of like tumultuous relationship. They were lovers, but didn't they get like caught in this sort of
they
terrible...
get caught. Hephaestus, Aphrodite's husband, is none too pleased, and
and like Disney he catches them in a net, right?
Yeah. He throws a net over them and then exposes them to ridicule. He brings like all the gods in to see them naked and laugh at them.
Yeah, so there's this both this connection and this sort of difficulty, and I like wonder if you could, from that start, like that launching point, talk to me a little bit about Venus in the home of Mars, Aries, Venus and Aries, and why she doesn't do so well. But it seems much more of a complicated drama than just doesn't do well.
It is. It's more complicated, which I think that when you look at a lot of the original Hellenistic delineations, I feel like this is a more complex relationship, particularly nowadays. But in the ancient world, and I content warning here, right? I'm about to talk about consent and rape, but consent in the ancient world wasn't really a thing, that there were very few bodies that had the ability and the legal standing to consent or not consent. Those were, male, upper class citizens, basically.
Yeah.
But many people in the ancient world were not in a position to consent or not. So the relationship of sexuality that you see in these ancient configurations of Venus and Mars, that I should back up, doesn't mean consensual sex never happened. Of course it did. But like it's not, there's all sorts of constraints in there, and that still exist to one degree or another today, but not for most of us, not in the same way. So in those original delineations, you often get those dynamics of sexuality playing out in the descriptions of what happens when Mars goes to Venus or Venus goes to Mars. So when Mars goes to Venus, it's a good thing, right? It's like the warrior's going to the courtesan or the prostitute, and he's getting his jujus out, and he's the stamina, right? Or it's the lovers are together. But when Venus goes to Mars, she's this woman, this vulnerable woman in the army camp. The archetype there is I don't know if anybody's read the Iliad, but the whole Iliad is Homer's work about what happens when the women who've been captured from Troy are being divided up by the warriors. And Achilles gets angry that he doesn't get the babe he wants, or that he thinks he's entitled to.
Yeah.
So when Venus is in Mars, that's more of the imagery that's being drawn on, not the warrior going home and embracing the lover. It's the unaccompanied woman in the army camp.
Okay. And I see though there is that sort of like that Mars and Taurus has that sort of not so nice feel either. There's
right. But
now we're like going on. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, it's just talking through these with you and really like listening to these family dramas.
Right.
I love that phrase. Well, you start to get a real feel for like how this is so contextual and how it's so important to go back to really understand things so that we can bring them back to the present context, which I guess this is what this work is all about, is understanding so we can dive in as opposed to seeing just like a set of archaic rules.
Right, right. And they do make sense, in a lot of ways. And that, I mean, I'm oversimplifying the Venus in
Sure.
In Scorpio, but there's when you get back into it, you begin to see all the reasons, the many layers, right? Whether it's the family drama layer or whether there's an esoteric meaning behind it, you can like looking at why Hermes and Virgo, go well together. You can really see the logic of it. And I think that's the beauty of diving into the Orphic hymns, is that they give us this real window. Yeah, it's really rich. Okay, we are at an hour and a half and we still have 2 more planets to cover. Should I forge ahead?
I think we should forge ahead. Yes.
Okay.
We'll get through these.
Okay. So let's talk about Jupiter. Jupiter, or Zeus, is I think there's two keywords I would say that come up for me when I think about the hymn to Jupiter. And they're light. Of course, lightning, we think about Jupiter and lightning, or Zeus and lightning. But light and liberation.
Okay.
So Jupiter is called the Great Liberator, and he is addressed, the whole tone of the hymn is of addressing a courtroom or a court judge, or it uses a lot of court vocabulary.
Okay.
Court not as in king's court, but court as in like a judge, jury court. And so it's very formal and appropriate. It's like, Your Honor, I bring before you the following testimony. And it uses these words like testimony and witness and liberate, which all are very resonant for Greeks who really loved their courtrooms and had a real belief that the court, in the form of the people of the jury, could be a liberating force. It could provide a correction to unrestrained despotic power. Okay. So Greek courtrooms often had as many as 500 or more jurors, because everybody had to serve on the jury by lottery. Mm-hmm. And the goal was to have as many jurors as possible so that nobody could buy off the jury. So it was fair. And that's part of the imagery that you get in the Jupiter hymn, is of a courtroom that is fair, that is properly run, and Jupiter's going to help you liberate yourself through this case that you're presenting him with. Yeah. And so the type of liberation that Jupiter brings is the sort of liberation that comes from the image that I get is of an elder who looks at all the evidence and makes a wise decision, or a decision that's going to help you move further in a positive way.
Yeah.
even if you don't you don't necessarily see it at the time. Sometimes you do and sometimes you don't, but they have your back. They're watching out for you, and it's a force for greater liberation. So that's one side of Jupiter. And the other side of him, which is related to that, is this idea of light. For the Greeks, mind is a form of fire and light. Like, they believed that this word nous, the same word that appeared in my dream, that we talked about during the part that is recorded. Nous is nous is used to mean mind, to mean a sort of like when we say a light bulb went off in my head, like that's your light, your nous. Oh. And Jupiter is that. And we see him here on Earth in things like the lightning, in not fire, but the like starlight and heavenly lights of different sorts. And that same force is in us, is in our intellect and our own inner light. So, and that's what causes us to make good decisions and deliberate and be able to, make wise judgments if we're on a jury. Those things are related for the Greeks.
Can I compare and contrast here for a moment?
Yeah.
I always think about like Jupiterian insight versus Mercurial insight. And I'm thinking about, from what you said earlier, Mercury is this sort of in the moment, quick thinking, right? Like just like decision. Whereas I think there's the word deliberate with Jupiter. It's the maybe the flash of insight, but it's also maybe that's something that comes when you've been sort of mulling on something for a long time, right?
Yeah. And I think Mercury is, the Greeks didn't necessarily associate Mercury with nous, although he is certainly quick thinking. They associated him with speaking and being a good like negotiator, which is a different, for them, like a different, it's like a quick tongue, they would say,
Whereas everything.
Like this up here is like we might call it more like rationality or something like that, reason. And then just, the other piece about light for Jupiter is that, this goes with Zeus's myths, is that he is a seed planter. The lightning that strikes, the noose that shoots out and into the womb, like it's that that seed planter it's a light seed. That makes sense.
Light. I love that. So,
and he does plant. He does get around. So that's Jupiter. And then Saturn. Kronos is trippy. Kronos is time, is space-time, the body of space-time. All of these beings are bodies.
Yeah.
But all of them, all of these other bodies are contained within Saturn's body. So this is where you get this image of the sphere, the cosmic spheres, right? For the Greeks, the perfect body is a spherical body. So, because it's equidistant, that's the most
Yeah.
beautiful and perfect formed. So these nested spheres are all inside Saturn's sphere. And Saturn, or Chronos in Greek means time, like literally, the time of day. But more specifically in the hymns, it refers to space-time. That the myth is that Earth and heaven were joined, and they needed to be separated. To make a long story short, they needed to be separated, and Kronos, one of Earth's children, took a sickle, castrated his father, heaven, and separated these two. And so he and everything else in the whole universe could exist because of this separation and creation of space-time.
Yeah.
And so all that we can see and know are inside of Saturn's body. And that includes, in a way, even the fixed stars that are outside of the planet Saturn's boundary, because the planet Saturn is the part of Kronos's body that we can see, right? But Kronos himself is an even bigger cosmic figure who each planet has cosmic dimensions.
Yeah.
And Kronos is space-time. Saturn is the part of Kronos' space-time body that's visible to us on Earth. And we're all, including the fixed stars, operating in space-time. The stars rise, the stars set.
Yeah.
And so we're all like little microbes living in Daddy Kronos's body, or cells or something, and that. So what that means when we say Saturn puts limits on things, or Saturn is structure, or Saturn is boundaries, space-time boundaries, space-time structure. Saturn is what we come up against because we live in a universe and it has rules, and we can't, or I shouldn't say we can't, but it's, if I pick up this glass of water, the glass of water is here, it's not there. That's the Saturnian boundary, right?
Yeah.
Now, if I smoke enough weed or take some mushrooms, some sort of Saturnian herb, and I am like, whoa, my glass is both here and there at the same time. That's also a Saturnian moment, because we have just, gotten inside Saturn's body in a new, cool way. Don't do that at home, kids.
I have to reference here. You just released on your Substack, it's like brief, like 15-minute like commentary.
Yeah, it's like 15-minute little commentary
on this, where you go into this in detail, and like I need to listen to it 5 times. It made sense, but I think it's going to make more sense if I keep listening to it. So, like, if you're into this Saturn conversation, really take the deep dive to subscribe to the Substack, and well, piece you do.
And same thing with Mars and with the moon. I have longer, 15-20-minute little listens on them as well.
Absolutely. Well, should we give some Saturn some final thoughts, and then we can go into the full of like where to follow all of that for I feel like we have to do Saturn some justice here. And what's some of the family, we talked about the family drama of Saturn, but may I ask, like, after translating the Orphic hymn, is there something that maybe endears you to Saturn in a new way?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we wouldn't be here without Saturn, right? I mean,
Yeah.
just to literally flesh out that myth a little more, right?
Yeah.
Uranos, heaven, was um Earth's Uranos and Earth
You
were
was it
having sex, and and they and he wouldn't get out of her. She couldn't birth her babies. She kept having babies, and they stayed inside her. She couldn't have her babies, and she asked Kronos, one of her children, to help her.
Yeah.
And he got an adamantine sickle from inside the womb of Earth and used it to help his mom. and, and then you could put this in really modern terms, right? And then he had a terrible parent figure, and he turned right around and ate all his own children, to keep them from doing what he had done to his dad. And his own partner, Rhea, tricked him into not eating Zeus, and Zeus wound up liberating his siblings. And so the cycle continues. But for Saturn, I do like Saturn. I don't I mean, I'm a Capricorn sun, so of course I like Saturn. But there if we didn't have space and time, we'd just be in that mush. And we couldn't be here. Like it's like saying I don't like getting wrinkles any more than the next person, but I don't want. I mean, what's the alternative? It's not a good alternative. Yeah.
That's Saturn for sure.
Yeah, and I also think Saturn is all the cool, weird space-time things too. And I was sort of joking around with the weed, but like, when I was just talking to Drew about this today. We were planning our class together, and I was saying, the city. I'm gonna wax eloquent here about New York for a minute. To me, the city is like a lover. And one of the things that I have this really intimate relationship with the physical city. And I was thinking about it in terms of Saturn, because I'll walk down a street somewhere, and I will be walking down that street in March of 2023. And at the same time, I am also remembering, and in some way, even in my body, experiencing that same street as I experienced it in 2005, as in 1998, as when I was a kid and used to come into the city with my mom. All those different times are existing in the same block of the street.
Yeah.
And that happens to all of us almost every day. And it's Proust wrote gazillion volumes about it in French. I mean, this experience of biting into your childhood cookie, and you can taste your aunt's tea room where you used to eat these cookies. That's also Saturn. the ability to time travel in these very normal but really beautiful ways. Yeah.
That's
there.
I can't think
Did
of
that
a
do?
that was a perfect ending.
Excellent.
Man, this was a long one. This was great, and I love that we are wow. This has been a terrific deep dive. I like saying your name, Kristin Mathis, Cosmic Spirit Auntie. How can people keep up with you, and tell us a little bit about your upcoming class
Stuff?
with Auntie?
Yeah.
Or-
So you can I'm Cosmic Spirit Auntie on Instagram. I'm Your Spirit Auntie. You are Spirit Auntie on Twitter. My Mysteria Mundi project is mysteriamundi.substack.com. That's where my newsletter lives and all my translations and just my stuff in general. If you want to go a little deeper with some of this material and also hear how it relates to Orpheus, Drew Levanti and I are going to be offering a 3-month Orphic initiate experience. And that is we're going to be doing a little free introductory event for that this Thursday at 3 p.m. And you can find
3 p.m. What time zone? Eastern time?
Sorry, 3 p.m. Eastern.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find out information about that either. I'll be sending out info through my Mysteria Mundi newsletter and on Instagram and stuff. But also you can go to Drew Levanti's sorry, my brain just gave out. I've been talking for a long time. Drew Levanti's bio.
Yeah.
And sign up
I'll put
there.
it in the show notes too. So Drew,
yeah, you can put it in the thing. Trust me, if you follow either me or Drew, you're going to hear about this in the coming week or two. And it's going to start in April and run for 3 months. And we're going to be going through the Orphic cosmology as an initiate's journey. Right? So we're going to how do you go through the cosmos in a way that is resonant with how Orphic initiates would have done it. So that's a lot of stuff. And I just think, get on my mailing list. That's the best way to stay in touch with me, really. And if you are able to, you can sign up with a free subscription. If you're able to afford a paid subscription, that helps me continue doing this work. But I try to make as much of it as possible freely available because I just want this to get out there in the world.
I will say that I'm a paid subscriber, and it's like one of the most satisfying subscriptions I have. Definitely worth it. Like I said, it's very unique.
Thank you so much.
It's poetic. Informative. It sometimes, if I've had a long day, I can just sort of let it wash over me. You do these wonderful recordings, and this has been such a privilege and honor, Kristin.
Oh my God, Stevie, I love talking with you, and we could talk forever and ever in a day, and we hopefully still will.
Yeah, and I'll give myself an outro too. I'm Vivi Henriette of Art of the ZODIAC. Thank you so much for joining today, and for those who are still with us, I'm so sorry about the technical difficulties at the beginning. And follow me in all the places, Art of the ZODIAC _ on Instagram and YouTube. And now I have a Substack, and I'm redoing my website, which is artofthezodiac.co. And I do these talks. I'm also a consulting astrologer, but really, come back for the talks. Talk. Talk.